Harlan Goldman with you, this special 1-hour program. You are going to want to stick around if you, like the rest of us, suffer from headaches, particularly migraine headaches. You're going to want to hear all about this because there's a new book out called Migraine Relief by our very own Dr. Thomas Polucki. He's in the studio today, and we're going to find out all about his research with the book and with migraine headaches. And then we have also in the studio, will be joining us a little later on, Pam Wolf, who's a Santa Clarita resident and is the recipient of many a headache, as I understand it. I am the deliverer of many a headache, more so than the recipient. And my staff and wife can certainly attest to that. But thank you so much for joining us. What made you write the book?
Oh, okay. Well, like 1 in 8 people who are still getting migraines, 1 in 8. 1 in 8
Wow.
people are getting migraines, substantial enough to seek medical profession. I used to. And that's a weird thing to say because according to everybody else and all of the mainstream research that you're going to find out there, is it is an incurable, lifelong, degenerative neurological condition that the best you can hope for is some temporary relief, right? So I was either too stubborn or too stupid to accept that. So for 50 years, I was finding how to beat the system. And that's, long story short, that's how I came to writing this book. I have had migraines my entire life. I knew all the school nurses, you know, and I loved my medical doctors. I grew up in a medical family, was testing for Johns Hopkins in 10th grade. But by that time, I was already on 5 prescription medications year-round. And I also took countless over-the-counters and, to be quite frank, self-medicated as well on top of all of that stuff. Woke up one morning next to the toilet and I couldn't turn my head. That was on a very short list of things that my conservative medical family even considered chiropractic an option for. And I thank God that the guy did not grab and jerk and twist and crank on my neck. But instead, you know, within a couple of visits, my neck was feeling better. But the surprising thing was within a very short period of time, probably within, you know, a couple of months, I noticed I was getting less migraines. And by the end of the first year, to really make a long story short, I was off all of my lifelong medication. So that really shifted my whole perspective on everything. But even then, it wasn't a cure. And it's not a cure. I'm not about to say that it is a cure, but it is a very effective approach, much more so. And Pam, you were a migraine nurse, right? You were a nurse for a migraine doctor, right? Yeah. And
yes, sir.
You can attest to that this, what we're doing with the, you know, what is in my practice and in the book, has it helped you more than everything you tried before?
Yes. Yeah. I am a nurse. I have been a nurse since my early 20s. I have suffered from migraines since I was in my 20s and went to every specialist, every doctor, tried every medication there was. And then 2 years ago, I started having migraines every single night. And they would wake me up at 2, 3 in the morning. I would try to get through it with meditation, and then I would take the medication, and then I would fall back to sleep at about 6. I'd have to get up and go to work. And I'd function all day because I thought, okay, my headache's gone. I can function. I did this for a year. And what I didn't realize is I was functioning on fumes. I was exhausted. I was afraid of the next headache. I was a wreck to my family, my husband, my kids, my grandkids. My work probably suffered from it. I didn't know what else to do. I went to every specialist, and then a friend of mine said, hey, I saw this ad. It was actually on K-Hits for this doctor who says he specializes in migraines. And mind you, I was scheduled to go in and have a surgical procedure for my migraines. And I thought, well, let me try this guy. What the heck, free first visit for evaluation, and tried everything else. So I went in. Can I tell?
Yeah, go.
So I went in, scheduled my appointment. I went in, told him what was happening. I gave him all of my medical records, all my x-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, everything. He reviewed everything in front of me, and he said, I know what's going on. So he came over and he did a small adjustment, which I was kind of scared of, but he is not like a chiropractor who cracks you. He uses a little gun, if you will, not a gun, but a little pressure thing. Anyway, he had me lay down, and he did an adjustment on my neck. Took about 3 minutes. I sat up, and I felt immediate relief. The fact that my head did not feel too heavy for my neck to hold up anymore, my pain was diminishing immediately. I'm not going to say it was 100% gone, but I was like, okay, I'm going to come back. He scheduled me to come back 3 times a week. I went to my car that day. I sat in my car, I called my husband, and I cried. I cried because it was the first time someone figured out how to stop the pain without medication and also avoid the headache from coming back. He got to the root of the problem, I feel. So I did. I complied with everything he had me do. I was coming as often as I needed to. And now here it is 2 years later. I show up in his office about once a month because I'm not having the migraines anymore. And plus, he showed me what to do on my own when I get a migraine or I feel like I'm getting a migraine. He actively has showed me a better life. Obviously, the procedure for surgery was canceled. I am not taking 8 different medications that cost thousands of dollars. I don't take anything anymore.
Well, you've been proactive, and we're talking about migraine relief, and we're going to go into some of the material that you can all use to be proactive about avoiding migraines and getting this book with Dr. Thomas Polucki. What you mentioned at the beginning of this show that 1 out of 8 suffer from migraines.
Yeah.
I never suffered from migraines. Jen, how about you?
No, I have not.
No migraines for you
thankfully.
either. So luckily, Jen and I are within that 7 of the 8. But why don't you explain to us what's the difference between a regular headache? Because as I've teased, I'm definitely the cause of many
Right.
regular headaches. What's the difference between a migraine headache and a regular headache?
Well, part of it is semantics. Migraine is a very narrow label. And if you're going to talk about migraines, you have to follow the science. What does the science say about it? And in my research, mostly to validate what we're doing, because it is very different than conventional medicine. But, you have to be able to not so much prove it, but you have to be able to say it with some authority. And that means that someone has to have researched it at some time and published it at some time. And that's a whole nother thing, because scientists don't trust the science, right? That's kind of how science works. You don't trust the science, you challenge the science. And if your challenge is correct and you fit within certain guidelines, you get to publish that research. So justifying what I was doing was a challenge, right? So what's the difference between a migraine and a regular headache? Well, a migraine is a neurological disease. It's not just a pain in the head. And it affects more than just pain in the head. It is usually also associated with visual disturbances, auditory disturbances, balance disturbances, digestive disturbances. In fact, pediatric migraines, there's a subgroup that is, they don't ever get a headache, but they have really bad digestive disturbances that are classified as migraine. They're called any episodic, I want to say it's episodic. I can't remember all of the nomenclature on it because it's really geeky science stuff. But anything that is recurring, neurologically based, and is in that category, whether it's a pain in the head, a digestive issue, or some kind of balance and hearing kind of thing, that can qualify as part of the overall migraine symptom. Now, the interesting thing, which I knew intuitively and personally, you know, I suffered from migraines my whole life. And when that chiropractor mostly got rid of them for me, I knew there was a connection there. But at that time, you know, there wasn't the internet. There wasn't PubMed. There wasn't anything. If you wanted research, you literally had to go to a university library to get that kind of a research. And I'm just a kid. I don't know how to do that, right? And most people, even researchers, aren't prepared to do that. So when you look at this stuff, you find some really interesting stuff if you know how to dig. Some of the top researchers now know that migraines are associated with tension in the neck. And, you know, that is part of why Botox is a recognized treatment for migraine. They try to paralyze those muscles at the base of the skull so they can't trigger the migraine anymore. The problem is you're not really resolving the issue by paralyzing the muscles. That's why people don't necessarily get the best result from that treatment.
So it's just disguising the pain.
Yeah, unfortunately, so much in medicine is about pain management and symptom management, and because they're not really addressing the root cause, people suffer needlessly. Every day I start patients that have been in pain management, sometimes for decades, and that you know, is a trick. It's like a very expensive and costly magic trick, because the pain is actually your body, or in this case, your brain, your migraine, your brain's cry to try and save its life. But just treating those symptoms is like taking the batteries out of the smoke detector. You know, the noise won't bother you anymore, but the house is burning down.
That's a great analogy. KHTS FM 98.1 AM 1220, hometownstation.com. Carl Goldman with you, along with Dr. Thomas Polucki, the author of Migraine Relief Mastery, a brand new book, the definitive guide that's just been published, and it's going on Kindle today, right?
Yeah, so, okay, the knee-jerk reaction is, I don't have a Kindle, right? So it's on Kindle. That's how you purchase it on Amazon. But there's an app for that. There's an app for every device. There's an app whether you have an Android phone or an iPhone or even something else. There's an application that is going to be able to read Kindle. Kindle's just the publishing company. So it's in digital release. It's only like $2. So there's really no excuse for not taking a look at this and seeing if this has got some of the answers you've been looking for.
Terrific. Less than a cup of coffee at your favorite coffee shop.
Yeah.
And Pam Wolf is in the studio as well, a Santa Clarita resident who suffered for many, many years with migraines and was recommended by doctors to do surgery. She saw an ad from a friend that saw it on hometownstation.com for Dr. Polucki, and magic occurred. Pam, did you know ahead of time when a migraine was going to hit?
Yes.
What were the signals?
I'd feel a heaviness in my head. They evolved at times, but during that critical 1 year period where they really exacerbated into me not being able to function very well, it would start in the base of my left skull, my occipital area, and I could feel that for about 20 minutes. And then it would migrate into my head, around the whole top of my head, into my cheek area, and felt like a red hot poker going through my face. I did try every medication. I tried acupuncture, acupressure. I tried everything because I was resistant. In fact, when a neurologist tried to direct me to go to pain management, I was resistant to that because I wanted to live my life. I didn't want to stop working. I didn't want to stop interacting with my kids, my grandkids. I didn't want to lay in bed in a dark room every day. I wanted to live my life, so I was looking for alternatives rather than medications, because even though the medications I took were not narcotics, they still made you not feel like yourself. And it is such a relief to be free of those. Now, if I get a regular headache, a sinus headache or something, like, yay, I'll just go to the drugstore. No big deal. But it is amazing when you get to the root of the problem and you work on curing it. And by muscle memory, I think that helps. I was told I would stop having migraines when I hit menopause. Y'all can't see me now, but I just turned 65 this week and well past menopause, and the headaches still stayed with me and got worse. Part of it was probably tension during COVID, all the uproar and everything going on around me, and you feel helpless. I probably internalized that, and it went straight to my neck and my shoulders and exacerbated this migraine, which was only explained as being a migraine because nothing else would help it, except for Dr. Polucki. And I do have to say, his staff is wonderful. When you call them, they don't say, "Hi, this is Dr. Polucki's office." They say, "How can I help you?"
That makes a big difference.
And that makes a big difference. You feel welcome. You don't feel like a pain person. You don't feel like you're intruding. I feel like a whole person now. I'm able to do all the things I couldn't do.
So when you had a bad migraine, would you have to stay in bed?
My migraines, for some reason, were mostly triggered at night. So I was already in bed. I would get up and I would move around and take the medication until the headache went away. And I'd go back to sleep. If I got one during the day, I could not function. I could not work. I couldn't talk straight because my words would get jumbled. They'd say one thing in my head and they'd come out separate, different. And it wasn't medication. It was just the brain function not working. My staff knew when I had a headache because my words would come out wrong. My husband knew I had a headache because he could see it in my eyes. He could see when it was starting. My eyes would flutter, things like that. So there was warning signs when I'd get a headache, but basically I would function because I'm a very strong person and I would just push through it. But looking back, I honestly don't know how I did it. I shouldn't have. But being in bed all day was not an option for me either. So he's been a true blessing to me.
Thank you.
Dr. Polucki, you spent a good deal of time in the book talking about preventative steps.
Yeah.
Diet's one of those, and we'll talk about that after the break. But before that, why don't you mention some of the preventative steps that people can take once you've taken a hard look and put the migraine in check?
Yeah, so we have a 3-step process. The first one is pinpointing the pressure that's triggering the migraine. In the book, I touch on it a little bit, but there is no one size fits all. That is my main pet peeve in all of healthcare. And I'm not just bashing medicine, because almost all alternatives are like this now, that in order to be commercially viable, there's a one-size-fits-all protocol for, let's just say migraine. migraine will get these medications, migraine will get these physical therapies, migraine will get these whatever, acupuncture points or these injections at these points. And the problem is that, people's bodies don't read that literature. They don't follow the rules for the most part. And without an individualized, and I love this word, bespoke, it's typically a very British word. It means custom tailored, very high-end personalization of the treatment plan. The overwhelming majority of these problematic conditions like migraine are going to fall through the cracks. And the best you can hope for is, like Pam mentioned, some temporary relief, enough to get back to sleep, but never really enough to be yourself again. And that's what we focus on. In the book, you can only do so much of that. And we do talk about, hydration and eating, not just to avoid triggers, but to support the way that your body needs to work in order to function normally and repair the damage and stay as strong and flexible as possible.
We're going to delve into that and give out a bunch of tips to keep migraines from hitting you simply by sticking with us. Also, picking up the book we're talking about, Migraine Relief Mastery. Dr. Thomas Polucki is the author. This is KHTS FM 98.1, AM 1220, and hometownstation.com. KHTS FM 98.1, AM 1220, and hometownstation.com. Carl Goldman with you. In our studio, Dr. Thomas Polucki and Santa Clarita resident Pam Wolf. We're talking about the new book that's come out that Dr. Polucki just released called Migraine Relief Mastery, the definitive guide for achieving lasting migraine relief through natural self-care practices. We spoke earlier about the fact that 1 out of 8 people suffer from migraines on a regular basis, and there are lots of things that we can do to help prevent that. And during the break, Jen, you were talking about, because I know you looked through the book as well, and talked about how surprised you were that food plays such an important role.
Yeah, I didn't really realize that. I don't suffer from migraines, but of course I get my occasional headaches. And the first thing I think of is, okay, have I had enough water today? And have I eaten? And then it's like, okay, well, I had a bag of chips 3 hours ago. So maybe that's what's causing the problem.
You didn't say to yourself, what did the kids just do?
Yeah. Well, that comes next. That's always an underlying question. But I was really intrigued, and I want to half joke, if I can, it's surprising at how much is in your book about food. Yeah. I was not expecting that. I was thinking, okay, he's going to give us tips and tricks and methods of maybe how to prevent or how to help when you have one. But there is so much great information in here. I just love it. It's almost like a recipe book, and that's what I'm kind of like half joking about.
It's a big chunk of the book is a recipe book. It's a cookbook. And the nice thing about it is, while I am targeting specific, very serious disease, this cookbook helps you stay healthier. Anybody, it's going to help. It's not like, oh, it's restrictive. It's this or that, or it's, we're limiting carbohydrates, or we're limiting fats, or we're limiting protein, or whatever crazy trend is out there right now. This is designed to stop the main causes of inflammation from the foods that you're eating, and that's going to help everybody.
Well, I mean, it's the old adage of you are what you eat. You hear your grandparents tell you that, and you go, oh, okay, sure. And as you get into adulthood, I think you realize that it's very true. We were talking about off the air about having, chips and all the additives that they put in them. And that's certainly affecting your body. Yeah,
there are literally 80,000 chemicals that did not exist when our grandparents were born. 80,000 chemicals that we're exposed to on a daily basis in our food, in our water, in our air, that our grandparents never had to deal with. And we've seen what that actually translates into, for a long time, we were seeing a constant incline in longevity. We were getting up to, not so uncommon to live to 100 years plus. And for the past decade, we've seen a steep decline in that. Because now those people who were born and raised in the era that all these chemicals are constantly surrounding us, it's having an effect, and it's not good.
I grew up on Hostess Twinkies, and I noticed you didn't include that in your book.
No, that's not food, man. That's a punchline.
Pam, did you change your diet as well then after you saw Dr. Polucki and he started to work on you?
Yes, I did.
How did you switch?
He has another book out on taking care of yourself that I picked up, and I do stay away from foods that are highly chemical additives, MSG, high salt, high fructose corn syrup, all of those things. I try to stay more natural, more healthy. I learned that organic doesn't necessarily mean organic. But I have altered my diet. I drink water constantly all day long. But yes, diet, sleep, activities, I'm very active. All of those things contribute, I think, to your overall well-being and stress relief on top of getting rid of your migraines.
Yeah.
And stress certainly plays a big role in triggering a migraine, correct?
Absolutely. And here's, when I talk about stress, it's not just the stress that we all know, like talking to your landlord, or having a bad conversation with a client or a coworker or something like that, or trying to manage your children. Those are all stressful, yes. What I'm talking about is the internal stress, the preload that so many people I see face on a daily basis, that you're already like just on the edge of having something fall apart. And all it takes is that heated conversation. All it takes is that sip of red wine. All it takes is that, things that you think should be relaxing. You should be able to go out and have a nice little slice of cheese with a sip of red wine, and all of a sudden you're laid up with a migraine, right? So yeah, there are some chemicals in there. I touch on that in the book, the histamines and the tyramines. But if you weren't pre-stressed, if you weren't all the sulfites too, if you weren't pre-stressed, your body would probably be able to process that. It's not good for you, but so many people don't get a migraine when they have a sip of red wine and a little nibble on cheese. But the people who do, the reason they do is because they're already pre-stressed to this limit where all it takes is a little bit of a chemical imbalance and boom, you are incapacitated. So yes, we do spend some time on the triggers. You have to. It's obligatory. You have to talk about triggers if you're writing a book on migraine. But the real thing is, the real reason of why people get migraines. It's not necessarily the trigger's fault. You have to be at that point that something's going to tip you over the edge. And that is where I come in as far as addressing the root cause. Where is that thing coming from? Is it physical? And in many cases, it is absolutely physical. And that is the one area that conventional medicine, except for the Botox injections, will never go near. There's two physical remedies that are prevalent in migraine management in conventional medicine. One is the Botox injection, and as I said, it really just paralyzes muscles, but it doesn't address why the muscles are causing the migraines in the first place. That's the differentiation of how we approach it. And the second one is pretty radical surgery. Brain implants and cutting away portions of the back of the skull and all kinds of stuff out there. And again, because that's not addressing why the pressure is there in the first place, it's just kind of cutting a piece out to, again, treat the symptom. A lot of people fall through the cracks there.
Taking the battery out of the smoke alarm, as you said earlier. Pam, you mentioned that one of the stress levels that you felt for a long time was COVID, and that's a worldwide stress that all of us experienced at some level. So, Dr. Polucki, did you notice that as COVID came into fruition, that the amount of migraine patients you were seeing increased once patients could walk back into a doctor?
Yeah. Okay. So I like to talk in terms of COVID silver linings, right? So COVID, during the lockdown, nobody was doing anything, right? It was just, whatever, state-sponsored terrorism. Did I say that? No.
I'll say that.
Okay. So nobody did anything, but that gave me some time. Here's the main thing that it forced me to do, because I could not get my own care. And I got to say, I want to preface this. Just prior to COVID, I got one of my worst migraines ever on the drive home from a world-renowned migraine specialist. And so that started getting me into the mode of, listen, there's got to be a better answer out there. So I started I became my own guinea pig. I mean, when you're in the throes of a migraine, you're doing whatever. You're sticking your head underwater. You're, trying to make yourself throw up so you can feel better. You're crunching on different areas of your head, hoping that you're gonna come on the right spot, the right combination to try to give yourself some relief. You try crazy stuff, whatever, and that's very hit or miss. But I had 50 years of practice, right? So when I got that migraine on the ride home, I decided that I got to figure this out. This is ridiculous. I can't do this anymore. And then when COVID hit, and I didn't even have access to that anymore, I had some time to start really systematically working out, how do you pinpoint the pressure? How do you rehab the rebound? So when I say rebound, if you're not a migraine sufferer, you might not know what that means. There is a thing called medication overuse headache, and every migraine sufferer knows about this. In fact, the more migraine medication you take, the more migraines you get. The more severe they are, the more frequent they are. It is just part of the whole thing when you become when you're a migraine patient. So the slang is rebound, right? So I got into finding my own pressure points, how I can treat them without having to drive an hour in one direction to get treated that may or may not work. So I started working on myself. I started really cracking down on the rehabilitation. And when I say rehabilitation, part of that is physical, part of that is chemical, part of that is detoxification, and it's all covered in the book. This book gives a good outline of that rehab process. And then, part of it is, how do I not get migraines in the first place? The first parts are about putting out the fire and, cleaning up the damage, either caused by the fire or caused by putting out the fire. And then you have to shift gears into, how do we rebuild? How do we give the body the support and the relief that it needs so that you never get to the point where you're going to trigger a migraine in the first place?
So you stay away from Hostess Twinkies, for sure.
I
So,
haven't had a Twinkie in like 50 years.
well, you and I will splurge at some point.
No.
We'll see what
No, sorry. Not going to happen.
Pam, Pam, you described earlier your first encounter with Dr. Polucki. Someone listening to this right now that is suffering from migraines and comes into your office, Dr. Polucki, take us through the first initial steps of what that first encounter with you looks like.
You want me to handle that? You're paying
no,
me?
go ahead, you
Okay,
handle
okay,
that.
I'll handle it. So the first thing is the phone call. Before they even get to me, we've got to make sure that there's a good likelihood that I'm going to be able to help. So my staff is amazing at handling that part. When they come to see me, I have my own questions because I want to make sure, for the patient's sake, but also for mine and my reputation, that I'm going to be able to help this person. I don't have a one-size-fits-all program. I don't have a protocol, so to speak. I have to figure out what is really going on with this person, what has not worked for them, so I don't just keep spinning the wheel, rolling the dice, and hoping that something's going to stick. And what they really need to get in order to get them better. And we spend a good amount of time on that before we even consider, do we move forward to the examination? And when we do the examination, I'm looking for some very specific stuff. The test I use, I blatantly stole from a world-renowned neurologist who doesn't accept insurance. In fact, the only way that I know about him is because we share an attorney. He will only take like $1 million injury cases. And so he's got some very impressive neurological testing that I have streamlined and mainstreamed and cut down to about a 1-minute examination where I can tell, is this problem, in most people's cases, it's something migraine related or neuropathy related. Is this problem going to be something that I can manage? Is this going to be something that I can help them with? And as long as they pass that criteria, then we sit down and we talk about what it's going to take.
And we're going to find out what that part is like right after this short break. We're talking with Dr. Thomas Polucki, along with Pam Wolf, Santa Clarita resident here in the studio. Carl Goldman with you on KHTS. Migraine Relief Mastery is the book, and you're going to want to pick that up if you have migraine headaches or know of someone with migraine headaches. You definitely want to pick up this book, and we're going to learn how to do that in a moment as well. So this is your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS 98.1 FM. As you're driving around Santa Clarita right now, you're hearing a whole show we've delved into, Migraine Relief Mastery with Dr. Thomas Polucki. Pam Wolf is in the studio, a Santa Clarita resident, suffering from migraines for years and finally got some relief, permanent relief, with Dr. Polucki. In fact, during the commercial break, Pam, we were talking about how many different doctors you saw prior to Dr. Polucki.
Yes, I saw doctors at the community level, neurologists, MDs.
And you're a nurse as well, so
yes,
you're,
so I know.
you're not...
Did my homework.
Yeah.
So I did see a number of specialists in the tertiary and university settings. Driving to me wasn't an issue. I went and saw all the specialists that I could see, basically. It wasn't until I went into Dr. Polucki's office for the first time that a doctor actually did a hands-on neurological exam on me.
Wow.
And he spent at least 20 minutes doing a series of different testing, which at first I thought, what is he doing? But as we progressed and I saw him on a weekly basis at the beginning, he would do these tests to see if I was advancing neurologically, if I was being cured. And I was amazed at how different from each exam that he did, how I was progressing. And with that, the noticeable alleviation of my headaches went with that. So I do want to say that he's not just looking at your records. He's not looking at what you're saying. He's actually physically evaluating you for your neurological deficits, and I had a lot. I couldn't think straight. My memory was bad. I I couldn't talk straight half the time. And that's bad when you're a nurse and you're trying to take care of patients and communicate with doctors and your staff. So I feel like that is a big part of his practice, is the hands-on, the recommendations, the avoidance of the stressors, and you can't avoid stress. I was probably one of those people that underlying always had stress, and then maybe the lockdown tipped me over the edge, looking back on it. But you don't know at the time until you see someone who actually listens to you, reviews all your records, and you feel safe with. And here I am 2 years later, migraine free, basically. Still get a few here and there, but that's not his fault.
And Dr. Polucki, as you mentioned, there's not one cookie cutter solution for this.
Never.
That each person has a totally different pathway to having relief.
Absolutely, 100%. But this book will handle, like I said in the beginning of the show, 1 in 8 people have migraine. Pam is an exception. Pam is more like 1 in 20 where nothing works except for the specific work that we do in the office. The book is designed to handle a lot of those 1 in 8s, though, that will get by with just what I cover in the book. And I think it's a good book. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's going to help a lot of people. My goal is to end migraine in our lifetime, and there's no way I can do that seeing one patient at a time. This gives accessible, usable, practical information that everybody can use, especially if you're suffering with migraines.
And as Jen, as you mentioned earlier, someone like you and me that don't have migraines, there's a chunk of great stuff in here.
Yeah,
Great
it's
recipes.
wonderful. Yeah.
I said I'm upset Twinkies aren't in here, but other than
I
that,
looked for you. I didn't see Twinkies anywhere. Yeah.
Other than that,
a lot of greens and grains,
Yeah,
and
but
of course healthy foods.
I
But
like that healthy foods. But you mentioned during the break that one of the things you liked best about the book was that there was places to write in and a kind of a workbook. Why don't
yeah,
you
it's
talk
great.
about that?
It's not just where you can ingest and take in all of this great information. There's a sample diary, like a template, and you can literally go through, write down what time you ate, whatever the food was, foods and beverages, supplements that you may or may not have taken. And then there's even like obviously symptoms, but then your mental clarity, your physical energy, rate that on a 1 to 10, your mood, your emotional state, breakfast, lunch, snacks, dinner. It's really helpful. So I like that you can take notes and see maybe a pattern develop.
Yeah.
It's great.
And you mentioned hydration as being one of the keys too.
Sure.
But with water, what about some of the things like I drink a lot of coffee in the morning, and that is actually fights hydration. It dehydrates you to some degree.
It can be a diuretic. So the debate is coffee good for migraine? Is caffeine okay for migraine or not? And the answer is there's no one size fits all answer. So caffeine is a drug. It does have a lethal dose. Believe it or not, you can kill yourself with caffeine. Most people are never, ever going to come close to that. But like any drug, it can be quite beneficial in the management, in the treatment of migraine, as long as it's used appropriately, as long as you pay attention to the results you're getting from it. You can get great results with coffee.
The book's Migraine Relief Mastery, Dr. Thomas Polucki. You are going to want to pick it up. And in fact, we'll probably have a special contest with special giveaway for it, maybe some autograph stuff and some other goodies. But check out our Facebook page, KHTS Radio. Pam Wolf, Dr. Thomas Polucki, thank you so much for joining
Thank you.
us. KHTS FM 98.1, AM 1220, and hometownstation.com.